Frontier Space is developing platform technology for in-space R&D and in-space biomanufacturing. The idea of going to space is not that difficult anymore. Our launch last month was done completely bootstrapped. So we did that without any investment.
Dr. Aqeel Shamsul, CEO and co-founder of Frontier Space, a UK biotech startup pioneering space-based drug development and biomanufacturing. Can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So a vial costs to send into space?
If we put enough resources, we could shorten that down to 10 to 5 years. Who knows, right? There might be a cure for cancer in space.
Is space just for billionaires? Thanks, Aqeel. Welcome to Health in Hyperdrive. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Dom.
What a fantastic background. I think maybe the place to start the conversation is medicine in space. Like, why is it even something worth talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very good question, Dom. So to put it all in context, the idea of space and health has always been there. So even the first astronaut, we need to understand what happened to the biology. But we've been building towards, since then, until now, about 50 years of research and development in space. And it have shown us there's nuggets, really golden nuggets that can help health, for example. I mean, one of the common one is aging. Some of the studies shown that you can accelerate aging by 10 times, and imagine being able to find counter therapy for aging. The other famous one is crystallization, and this is actually one of the most studied phenomenon. Because you don't have gravity pulling the crystal down, you get really nice crystals. And when you get really nice uniform crystals, you can move away how you treat people from IV into injectables. So imagine where you have insulin shot and injectable at home, you can do that with cancer drugs. So there are these little nuggets that really have shown that it can really improve and help health on Earth.
And is it just the microgravity, the fact that is that the key advantage of space? It's gravity stops us doing some kind of medical things on Earth, and in space there are kind of different opportunities. Is that the key differentiator? Yeah,
so when you go to this space environment, the key one is you have gravity and you don't have gravity. And that really changed from the way cell or crystals structure themselves, or even down in the molecular level, sort of genetic pathways and how they're behaving, because this is kind of like a stressor point for cells, as an example, right? So that's the key difference. Is on Earth we have gravity, in space we have very minimal gravity, we call it microgravity, and that changed physical nature.
I didn't really understand this, but what I read was certainly for a lot of modern drugs, they're kind of based on large proteins. And to grow a large protein, it's actually quite hard to do that on Earth because effectively it kind of collapses on itself a little bit. Whereas in space, you don't have that constraint. So you're able to grow effectively proteins, drugs are unique or unconstrained. Essentially, the sort of the essence of the protein crystallization piece. Is that right?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand it. You're the expert here.
Well, yes. Basically, you're right. I think one of the key target area now for health is biologics, right? As you mentioned, larger proteins. So over the last decades now, we kind of master small molecules, so like your aspirin type therapy. But now can we use sort of monoclonal antibody, larger biologics or larger proteins, as you mentioned. But it can actually covers in both the, let's say, manufacturing value chain. So in the protein expression system where you produce the protein, similarly, the proteins are quite large on itself. But once you purify and try to crystallize them, that crystal is also quite large. So in both cases where you have larger mass, gravity would just start pulling it down and you get sedimentation effect.
Okay. And the other, I suppose, like as we're kind of understanding space, like there's, I guess the classic thing you always hear are giving, around the argument of investment in space is, technologies in space are developed and then there are applications on Earth. And I read that MRIs, CT scans, some of the technology from that came from NASA. Some innovations around artificial heart pumps that came from some of the work done in space. But this is not what we're talking about today. It's not really the ancillary benefits or the side effects. This is really pure medical research in space, and that's what you're focused on largely.
Yeah, correct. So, I mean, the idea of researching using space environment for health is kind of been picked up over the last 20 years. And this is during the time where the space station came up. So over the last decade alone, we are seeing more and more sort of bigger pharma or biotech or innovative smaller biotech that really exploring this new domain to really improve either their drug pipelines or understanding, what new innovative compounds or molecules that they can find.
I guess this is we're probably getting into the depths of it a little bit, but this is probably the point where it's maybe good to hear a little bit about your background, like how it sounds like a pretty kind of a cool career running a space health company. Like, how do you get into that? Like, what kind of led you to doing this?
Well, I mean, it's kind of been going on for over the last 7 years is when like the idea kind of popping into my head. But yeah, if you have time, we could go into that detail. But basically, at the end of my master's, I wanted to do a PhD. And it was quite critical on what PhD that I wanted to do that could have an impact. So at that time as well is when the idea of space commercialization, new space is coming up, right? There's so many people that already start working on rockets, very, very smart people. But actually, if we're going to venture into space, bio is the hardest question because we are not designed to live beyond the Earth vicinity. So when I started looking into this in the PhD, the PhD is basically building the lab that goes into space station or space. But then the more we look into it, we starting to realize, there's nuggets that can really help therapeutics. But the challenge is no one can access the environment to use it. It's not productized enough. It's not commoditized enough. The costs are too expensive. So that's why we kind of start the company in terms of making this tool available. Because if we can answer, who knows, right? There might be a cure for cancer in space. But we need to be asking those kind of questions, essentially. But one of the personal motivation was during the end of my PhD, my great aunt, she suffered from cancer and I saw the progression. And yeah, for me, it's like, okay, we have this tool that has just never been accessible. Myself and the co-founder have now the understanding and the talent to do it. Why not try to start a company and answer these questions?
Maybe you can describe a little bit what the company does.
So Frontier Space is developing platform technology for in-space R&D and in-space biomanufacturing. So our platform technology enable pharma, biotech and biopharma to use our platform in space to access this microgravity environment, to find new drugs therapy, to find new drugs compound and manufacture them for R&D purposes.
And in simple terms, that means you're putting a lab on a rocket. It's going into space, we're doing experiments, and it's coming back down.
Yes.
And I can do that for $2,000.
Pretty much.
And I think you kind of not undersell, that's not the right word, but I feel like you say it in such a matter-of-fact way, but what you're doing is actually quite mind-blowing, right? Because you're
nuts.
Yeah, so you're putting, you've built a miniature lab that can go on a rocket to get launched into space where people can do experiments in space, microgravity, and then bring it back down to Earth, see what the results are, and learn from that. And you launched last month for your first launch, right?
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yes. Yeah. I think I probably just been saying it too much. It just stopped becoming normal. This is my day-to-day life. But you're right. I mean, when I explained this to my grandparents, they were like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
But that's the world that we're living now. I mean, the idea of going to space is not that difficult anymore. Just to put it in perspective. Our launch last month, as you mentioned, was done completely bootstrapped. So we did that without any investment. And the idea is to show, we can do this without any significant amount of money, both to the investors and our customer, pharma.
And this kind of is right. You mentioned this before, but kind of really riding on the trend of space becoming much more commercialized, where kind of costs are decreasing quite like by orders of magnitude. I think I read somewhere like they've reduced by like 1,000 times or something the price of sending a piece of cargo to space. The frequency of launches is increasing massively. And then the commercialization of even like space stations, with the International Space Station closing down and the new commercial space stations being developed, that the whole industry of space is just becoming a lot more commercialized and consequently more accessible.
Exactly.
So effectively what you're doing is kind of riding on that. And how long was it in space for?
Yeah, so
how big is what does a lab in space look like?
Yeah,
maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Of course. So our first product is based on a concept called CubeSat or 2U. So it's 1U is kind of like 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters. So something that you can hold and pick up, basically.
Yeah.
But our product, which is called Space Lab, the first generation is really about nearly the size of a shoebox, slightly a bit less. So something that you can pick up, something that you can bring around, carry. And the idea is because the unit economics of space industry is still mass price per kilogram. Yeah. And the heavier is, the more costly, right? So our expertise are really in miniaturizing them and making them accessible. So, but imagine a shoebox lab that you can control fluidics, you can control thermal, you can control the atmosphere, so you can keep it CO2 relevant to the cell, and then basically contain them and go to space, survive the launch, survive the being in orbit, and then survive re-entry. It sounds difficult, but we're getting there. We've done it.
So you launched in April, and how long it was in space for? Just like for a few hours. The experiment, which sounds quite short. But then, maybe I have a couple of reference models. One is like a parabolic flight, where people like have that almost that weight loss effect with those flights. And I think they get about 30 seconds or something of microgravity. So 3 hours compared to, say, 30 seconds is massive. And then I think the other thing that seems quite unique is you get the samples back to Earth, which is really quick. Because if I'm doing an experiment on the space station, I'm lucky if I can bring anything back, and two, maybe I get it back a year later because they don't have that much, that many flights coming back to Earth. You can only kind of hitch a ride with an astronaut. Is that kind of essentially where you fit, kind of somewhere in a longer duration and faster results?
Yes, exactly that, Dom. So I think the challenge of doing that on Earth is, as you mentioned, we don't have the longer duration microgravity. So parabolic flight is very short. Plus, you're actually introducing hypergravity. The cell or the crystal is experiencing both environment. Whereas if you want a good experiment, you want to maintain the control. And if you do it previously on a space station, you could not see your sample 6 to 12 months because the down mass is not that regular, right? As you kind of mentioned. So we sit kind of in the middle where we can go up quite quickly. We can stay as long as we want. Most of the time, we're not going to stay beyond 1 week, 1 month kind of maximum, depending on what we are going to grow. And this is where the long duration matters, because you want the cell to be able to grow, you want the culture to be able to synthesize and grow, and then bring it back down. And the bringing back down stuff is the crazy bit, because we kind of SpaceX kind of solve going up. Bringing back down is the next element of the equation that needs to be solved. But yeah, we did it with our partner called Atmos. They were the first European commercial company to attempt re-entry. That puts us the first space biotech company to attempt biological re-entry in Europe. So there was a multiple firsts for basically Europe in general, and I think it was quite exciting.
Yeah. And can you talk, what sort of things did you have in your first lab? Are there things you can talk about, or is it all top secret?
No, we can talk about it. I think we published it in the press release, so people can have a look at that one. It was also covered a bit on the BBC. This was actually in partnership with Imperial and Cranfield. Imperial was the main one because they also cover the microbes, the synthetic biology engineered microbes that we sent into space. So in this mission, what we did was trying to understand basically the protocol from lab to space to lab. In our case, we met our primary objective. So we launched, it survived launch. We got picture of it, so the structure remains in place. We got the data back, and we were very, very happy with that.
And what was it exactly that was launched? Like, is it?
Yeah,
I heard you on the BBC, so I actually know the answer.
Yeah, it's okay. So what we're developing, the bioreactor, and this is why we call it platform technology, because it can also be used for culturing cells, proteins, stem cell, or crystals, but it can also be used to culture microbes, which is kind of on the cell side of things. But the idea behind this mission was to look at precision fermentation. So this is kind of a newer term that was replacing synthetic biology. I guess it sounds a bit better. But the idea is that you engineered the microbes to produce proteins that you want, right? So in this mission, we did that with Imperial, so under Bezos Center of Sustainable Protein, where they actually have different microbes that produce different proteins. So what we sent, I think it was about different 5 or 10 species. I can't remember on top of my head now. But we can produce basically biofuel, biofood, biomaterial, vitamins, and drugs, pharmaceuticals. Because the idea is that when you go to space for long duration in Moon and Mars, it's going to be economically more feasible to carry 3 milligrams rather than raw stock into Mars all the time. You carry a few milligrams, culture them, and grow them to produce basically whatever you want: fuel, food, protein, drugs.
The launch you just had, the focus was on, well, I guess it's like learning how to send a lab to space. Like, I shouldn't, now I'm the one who's like playing it down a little bit. But like, so first of all, it's like learning how to send something into a lab into space, bring it back down to Earth, recover it, and kind of understand the parameters of kind of how that works and whether you can do the science that you want to do. But then specifically what you were, or what the team was testing was really microbes to support future astronauts, people going to Moon, going to Mars, or further, or living in space with the supplies they need, rather than taking up a Sainsbury's shopping basket. They're taking microbes, and they can kind of grow what they need in space, and you're kind of proving that that's something that's viable.
Yes, exactly that, Dom. Yeah, I think you cover it very, very well there.
Okay, thanks. I'm learning, man. And so I guess when I think of space, and maybe this is a little bit historic, it always seems like it feels quite niche and super expensive and not something that's at scale. I mean, I think it's going to be a long time before there's a large percentage of the population living in space. So, food for astronauts, I mean, it's incredible, but it's not helping the masses of folks on Earth. The direction of travel for this kind of mass benefit for humanity, right? Like the protein crystallization and doing things more volume. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, so the way we always kind of frame it, we are working in 2 market vertical. So we have the space for Earth and space for space. We can service both market. There's always a demand required to help astronaut to be able to do this, right? So we know that we can service those market. But what we are doing now is having that as a baseline, is trying to see what we can do to help space for Earth. So the idea is that what can we learn while we are developing this technology, because we came from a space engineer background, but what we're trying to repurpose and trying to understand is by talking to health practitioner, manufacturer, pharmacists, and just really understand that what can we do in space that can benefit space for Earth.
So you mentioned this, like manufacturing drugs in space for use on Earth. Is that like something you're thinking about, or is that a little bit too Star Trek?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the first mindset is not a matter of when. It's not a matter of if, it's when. It could be 20 years down the line. If we put enough resources, we could shorten that down to 10 to 5 years. But in our case, right, I think the idea of manufacturing it at scale and use that as a main therapeutic application, that's still a bit far off, because we still need to make sure, the drug that is manufactured, that is understood, it's safe, it goes through regulatory approval. But what we're doing now is actually working with drugs that's already in the market that we can either learn or repurpose in space, because then it's easier to go through approval. So it's more on the R&D, but let's say smaller to medium production, to really kind of speed up new development, new targets, or new novel proteins.
So like an example of this, I read this. So Merck, my former employer, the cancer drug Keytruda, they did some studies on the International Space Station, really to enable a subcutaneous version of Keytruda, effectively the benefit being for a patient, instead of with the new formulation from space, instead of going to a hospital to have the IV treatment for cancer, they could have it as an injectable in their home. And that's because they're able to design or kind of shape new crystals in the microgravity environment, learn about them, and then maybe manufacture them on Earth. I mean, that was a few years ago. Are there kind of other examples, or is that kind of the prime example?
Yeah, I mean, that's the famous example, because
Right.
Keytruda is worth, what, 20 billion US dollar per year? So
a little bit more, like 30, I think it is.
Yeah, so that's what people always use, basically. But this is a really good example, because the benefit is clear, right? So if you don't need to go hospital, I mean, imagine the stress that you reduce from patient perspective. If you can make it accessible at home, you make it more accessible, because you don't need to queue up for getting therapy. So there's many benefits. I think that's the real famous one that they use. So basically, I don't know if I have time to go into this, but the idea is that when you manufacture the crystal in space, you get much more uniformity, and this is quite critical to make subcutaneous feasible. Because if you do that on Earth, the different shaped crystals, you get highly viscous formulation, and that makes it very difficult to go through the needle. But when you have it much more uniform, you can actually pack a much more concentration with less viscosity, and that makes it available as an injectable. So that was like the key difference. But I think I think you should know this better than me, but based on the paper that's out there, basically what they did is they learn formulation up there and trying to reduce sedimentation effect here on Earth. And this is the kind of thing that we can learn in space to increase production yield, for example, on Earth. And this is what we're targeting.
And so you talked a little bit about time frame, and you said it's not if, but when. What could be possible with this technology, say in the next 5-10 years? What's maybe the optimistic scenario there, that if things go well?
Yeah, so I mean, in our case, we actually have an even long-term plan. Our 10 years plan, we should be able to identify, let's say, a new drug pathways and new drug targets, because every time we go up there, we actually have allocation where we do our own R&D. In terms of what can happen in the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, there's already drugs that are in the market, for example, that is having their patent expiring, for example, and there's a lot of trends where people are trying to reformulate the drugs that's already in the market to something else. This is something that we are targeting and trying to look at. The other things that we know is going to be coming up is because there's a lot more incentive behind this in the agency, the European Space Agency, the NASA. Is looking kind of like organoids, organ on a chip. So this is another example, a clear example where structurally is so much better. Trying to do that on Earth, you kind of need all the support around it. In space, you can really get really nice 3D cell culture. So I think we can start imagining where we have this superior organoids that we can use to basically do drug development.
Maybe help me understand this a little bit. Like an organoid, are we talking about like an artificial heart grown in space, or not quite that? I can tell by your face I got that a bit wrong.
So I mean, for now, simple organoids, smaller type circular organoids, spheroid organoids, sorry. Technically, that's possible, right? So if you can, let's say, take your own stem cell, repurpose them, or actually target them to grow, I don't know, your cardiac tissue, for example, and then you can kind of grow them on in space because you don't have the limitation. You can actually just use that as your own organ transplant, and that's quite critical because it's once you lose your cardiac tissues, they don't fix themselves, so you do need to replace them. These are kind of one example that is quite cool. There's another company in the States. What they do is a retinal implant, and they already been doing quite a lot of research in this in space. Because when you're trying to grow retinal replacement on Earth, like retina is vertical, right? It's going to be quite difficult when the gravity is keep pulling it down. So you're never going to get like a good replacement for your retina. So there are some nuggets that shows that you can target smaller tissue type. But down the line, I mean, who knows, right? We might be able to, culture your own heart in space.
Okay, but that's probably more like the maybe the 50-year time frame or 30-year time frame, not quite the 5 years.
If you put enough money in it, then
okay, so we need a little bit of investment. But that's really interesting. Then, so this like a smaller. Like a retina, which is much smaller and lighter, maybe that would be something that's kind of feasible. And I looked into this a little bit. I remember when I was at Merck, I went round the 3D printing labs, and it blew my mind that I knew they would have, I don't know, plastic 3D printing and maybe metal 3D printing, but it blew my mind that they had organ, 3D printing. Largely for kind of drug testing. That's the kind of the use case. But the challenge with organ printing on Earth is they collapse, so they have to build scaffolding. So you can't effectively build a natural organoid. That's so. The ones that you were talking, I probably took us a little bit too far forward, but the ones you were talking about are more like, the organoids you were talking about, like really small scale for drug testing or actually for therapeutics?
So I think we'll have to start with drug testing for the time being, because we still need to go through sort of, this Dom, so GLP, GMP types of regulations. So GLP, good laboratory practices, GMP, good manufacturing practices. All of that is basically saying, if you're going to do this, this is the result, right? So that it just needs to be controlled and measure and note taken. So I think to use organoids for therapeutic, we are still even far away from that on Earth. In the short term, let's say 2 to 3 years, we can start seeing more and more organoids being used for drug screening. But down the line, it's possible.
And from maybe a research perspective, the technical piece of you've built the lab, you've sent it into space, and that's your kind of version 1, and that's going to improve over time. But you're on a path to doing that successfully. What else needs to sort of happen for that to be successful? Like, do your general scientists know what the opportunities are, or not so much because space has been so out of reach for people?
So do you mean like our scientists or like general scientists?
Yeah, I guess I mean more general. So you're giving people access to space. It's a new technology and a new capability for massive. You're making it accessible. You're making space accessible for kind of scientists in Europe or around the world, really. And so is there a lot of education that needs to happen? So, people need to think differently because it opens up new possibilities. Yeah,
I mean, that's another good question. Simple answer is yes. Like when you are a scientist and you're trying to pipette your cell culture, you don't think what happened if I turn off gravity.
Right.
Right. So, but gravity is like your fundamental force of nature, your light, your magnetic forces. When you change physical force of nature, things change dramatically, basically. I think that's the mindset that you need to get into. As you mentioned, the barrier in the mindset is twofold. So it's always been cost, and it's always been what can I do with it. On the cost side of things, this is what we're tackling. We're trying to make sure that we understand our own cost basis, our cost of goods. How do we reduce that to make it into a price point that is palatable? So, we're even launching our product launch, a passive system where we can start sending vial for, let's say, £2,000.
Wow. Okay.
To reduce the cost barrier. Then on the other side of things...
Sorry, can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So a vial costs £2,000 to send into space?
Yeah.
Like in my head, you kind of think at least hundreds of thousands, like even hundreds. I mean, you're probably thinking millions, like for some kind of something in space. And then maybe you're reducing costs, hundreds of thousands. But that's really approachable, right?
That's
a couple
really
of £1,000,
yeah.
right? Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
But it's a very good point because it is now accessible, and we do that on purpose. Is because first of all, if you're trying to sell it, not a lot of people will go for the full-fledged product sometimes. They just want to try, keep it simple. So, but the idea is that if we keep it simple, we can actually reduce the price point to make it more mass accessible. The other barrier is the knowledge piece, and this is the real difficult thing. Is because not imagining having no gravity is like... Wow! Right?
Yeah,
we're so used to it.
Yeah, we're born with it. We live with it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
always there. So kind of reimagining a world without gravity or the possibilities.
Exactly.
I can imagine that's quite hard.
Yeah, it is, but that's why podcasts like this are going to be good. But we also been building our collateral. So we have a lot of marketing or communication collateral that we regularly send out to our potential customer. And we have the call really trying to educate them. There's a lot of hand-holding in the start. This is a new sector. This is a new playbook. There's no playbook. So we have to kind of create the playbook.
And who are the early pioneers in this area? Is it just someone who's kind of curious and wants to have a go? Or is it someone with, specific expertise? They've already been imagining the possibilities and now have an opportunity to try it? Like what's the profile of the early innovators here?
Yeah, so if you look at the companies that send into space, most of them are really big pharma, like Merck or MSD, Eli Lilly, Amgen, people that have the time and bandwidth to innovate and resources. But actually, if you look at the detail, most of them are really people who are just either they like space or serendipitously encountered into space. I mean, one of the examples that I mentioned about retina, for example, she was working in her lab, and then someone mentioned, I've got, there's a lecture in Pisa. And then she just went down there, and it was a lecture about what you can do in space. So there's this kind of serendipitous moment that essentially built the last 20 years in the space station and the case study behind it.
This is really one of the key points or the key motivations of me doing health in Hyperdrive is there are technologies and there are innovations out there that are maybe not so well understood, and we want to kind of shine a light a little bit on them. That's kind of why we're doing this, and that's why I'm glad.
Thank you.
Well, no, that's why I'm glad you're here. It's super fascinating. But how would you advise someone to go about kind of engaging in space? Scientists are generally immensely curious people. I'm sure there are thousands of people out there who are interested in doing something in space. But how would you advise someone to sort of think about it or go about it?
Yeah, well, first thing is come talk to us.
Okay, that's easy.
Because we can short circuit a lot of the learning from our collaterals. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. I think over the last 2 years, the idea of health in space has kind of blown up. And this is because you got a company for example, Varda that raised so much money, kind of create a lot of buzz behind it. But since then, there's a lot of company popping up here and there. And this is because it doesn't came from out of nowhere. We've done a lot of research. We've done over, I can't remember on top of my head now, but definitely around 3,500 research in space station. Around 60 of them are in biotech and biopharma. And there's a lot of nuggets that show that you can really do real positive things.
Maybe this is a good point. You started talking about, I think, some of the space stations coming online. Avada is are they a space?
No, they are another re-entry vehicle.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, I got that.
But there's a company called VAS.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the moment, you're focused on a specific re-entry vehicle with Atmos Space Cargo. Like, how do you kind of project forward, like how you're thinking about this, whether you work with space stations, whether you, I don't know, are you thinking about putting your own space station in up there, or how do you feel that you'll kind of work with the new ecosystem, that's a commercial ecosystem that's happening in space?
Yeah, I mean, if we make enough profit, I think we can invest in our own space station.
Okay.
But yeah, it's building and preparing towards the infrastructure is how we see it. So we don't work with just one company; we work with multiple company, because the risk is still in the infrastructure, right? If if a company missed the slot, we need to be able to then go back to our customer and replace that quite quickly. And the difference now is that there's more and more company that is able to do that. So we partner pretty much with all the re-entry majority, and then there's still some coming up. But all the majority we have already partnered. Our system is designed to be able to be fitted into their system. Similarly, we are working with commercial space station that's coming up and just trying to understand how does that model work. There's a demand and there's a need, because once the ISS is being decommissioned, space agencies across the world need to find replacement.
Maybe you know this, like, I'm sure you do. Like, so the upcoming, so the ISS is the main space station at the moment.
Yeah.
There are a couple more planned, Starlab, plus one other whose name I can't remember. And then there's maybe an Indian one that's in planning, and a second Chinese space station. Is that roughly right, or is there a lot more coming? And what's the sort of the time frame of these?
Yeah, so I mean, last number I checked, there's slightly more than 10, basically, from different nations globally. So obviously, some nations have their own interest to have their own space station, right? But there's also commercial space station. The famous one you just mentioned, Starlab. Actually, Chief Scientific Officer of Starlab sits in our board of advisor. So that is helpful. The other one is Orbital Reef. This is Jeff Bezos. The Sierra Space, VAS, Axiom. So by my reaction, you are seeing there's more and more, right? Maybe not all of them will survive. But yeah, I think this is becoming more and more accessible. We're going to have several winners, which is good for the industry. But it's all about how we prepare towards that. The challenge now is that a lot of these national space agencies are being subsidized by taxpayers. How does pure commercial play looks like? And this still needs to be worked out.
So a lot of new capacity, a lot of new capabilities, a really big growth that's happening in space. Could we maybe kind of project a little bit further forward? I think this is maybe using our imaginations a little bit.
We have to, right?
Like, I mean, one of the interesting things is, I worked in health, and drug development cycles are actually really, really long. So you do have these like fairly long time frames of 10 years, even sort of 20 years ahead. And with space, I think it's even, you can even think longer term than that. Like 2050, like what's the world look like in a good scenario from your perspective? Like, what are the, say, major 2 to 3 changes from where we are today?
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question. But
I don't know what it's loaded with. We'll find out.
But I mean, 2050 is a long time away. But you've probably seen this in your career, right? I mean, the growth of tech and innovation is exponential. And we are now living a very exciting time where it's the first time that we can use biology as a technology. And it's the cost that is accessible to everyone. And the combination with that being commercial space is coming up. So I'm just trying to answer this from a space bio perspective. But if you're asking me generally what happened in 2050...
space bio.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea is that protein expression system becoming more accessible. We can re-engineer bio. We can use this environment more regularly. I think 2050 is something we should be able to at least see a successful organ transplant, for example. I think that's within the realm. There will be more and more production of drugs for therapeutics. It's going to be quite challenging to really reduce the cost of by producing on Earth for therapeutics because you have to add the energy of leaving Earth. But there are some nuggets that we've identified that could really benefit, the really high value proteins, really hard to do proteins, hard to express crystals as protein and hard to crystallize that can benefit from this environment.
Drugs are actually very small, right? So it's not like we'd talk about building cars in space or microwaves or washing machines. Like drugs are actually small and light. So consequently, there's probably some good kind of feasibility there. And then some of the headwinds, you talked about them, operational costs, the regulatory, different nations coming together. Like there's some things there. What would need to go well? Like what would you love to happen us to take full advantage of the opportunities that space offer us in the near term?
I mean, if I have a genie,
genie,
or wishing crystals, I would love all of the infrastructure players to succeed because that will reduce our price point and we can make that more and more accessible. I think the key thing is still the mindset and education piece because we really need to kind of educate, most of the industry. Big pharma is a multi-billion industry, right? There's a lot of people and layers to educate. So I think the idea is that if we can commoditize this to make it more accessible to the public, I think that would be a real winner.
Education, getting the word out, and then kind of building the capacity. You're definitely right. Like, I have my experiences in big pharma and large corporates. These companies are massive. There's so many people there. Like, the education that needs to happen is really quite vast. And it kind of crosses all technology and innovation areas. It's not just space. I think the advantage that space has is fun. Like people like it, right? Like whenever I mentioned that I'm going to be talking to you, and like everyone I mention it to is really excited, and they're excited by what you do. So I think you have really the opportunity to inspire a lot. One question I haven't asked, and I've been sort of thinking about a little bit, is...
Go for it.
Yeah. Can I get on a rocket? No. The question is really around AI and the role of AI in this. We talked earlier about unconstrained thinking or imagining a world without gravity and what that could do with in terms of kind of... how hard that is for a scientist. But with an AI tool or agent, you can effectively put that in as a constraint or remove that gravity constraint in discovery. Have you kind of come across anything like that? Do you see any opportunities there?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think AI and microgravity are both tools. I think we have to use the tools to our advantage. I think that's the first mindset, right? And I think, if you want, AI will help so much in terms of defining new crystal structure, defining new chemical compound. I think Google or Alphabet released the
AlphaFold,
and that has improved to the point that it's becoming so much cheaper to do it, right? But AI also have certain limitation. It can't actually physically crystallize things. Maybe not yet, I don't know, who knows, but you do need to be able to access the environment to actually physically make things, right? So we don't see it as a competing tool. We see it as an added value. Like if you're going to do something very expensive in space, well, we're trying to make it cheaper. But how do you reduce the risk? It's using AI. It has benefit there. It has benefit in terms of like what we're trying to do is actually include in our system really advanced sensors. So like we are miniaturizing fluorescent microscope, which is not readily available now in the market. So once we get that development done, we're actually quite far ahead in terms of fluorescent miniaturization. But when you start taking a lot of images, there's a lot of data, and you need to be able to process that data. AI again is another brilliant tool to be able to do that and detect patterns.
Like, can you give me like a Sesame Street lesson on like how does it all work? So you have a lab, there's somehow a launch happens, something happens in space, it comes back down to Earth, people get the results. Like, what's that process like? Could you talk me through it a little bit?
Yeah, so I think to be able to make this available and accessible, the service needs to be commoditized and productized, right? So, I mean, if you're a scientist at Merck or MSD, you probably don't want to think about what happened when I launch it or it doesn't go to the right orbit. Like, you don't need to think about it. All you need to do is like, I get to microgravity, I get my result, right? So in our case, basically, we're trying to handle all of that. Essentially, customer comes to us. We work obviously in the first few, let's say if it's a first project together, we work closely to design experiment, and making sure it will survive this journey, it will get back. But it's fundamentally what we do is we work together. We give them the lab, integrate them. We take the lab to, let's say, Space Center, which is normally Kennedy. We often, if you're going to be working with mammalian cell, they require light access, so they need to be physically at the launch site. We integrate it at the launch site, put it on this rocket, and then just get launched. Once we launch it, that is with our partners to kind of handle the operation side. We still get data all the way, so we understand what happened to it. But once it's in orbit, because of our sensor suite, we can actually get a lot of the data and information, what happened to it in microgravity.
So maybe I can drill into that a little bit. So,
Go for it.
So the way you've spent a period designing an experiment with a researcher scientist. Do you have multiple experiments in your lab at the same time, or it's just one experiment per?
So it depends, right?
Okay.
Because our system is modular. But in like any other experiment, you need statistical data sets. So
Okay.
it needs to be enough replicates and control.
Okay, so let's just go with that example. So you know, I've worked with you as a scientist, and I'm not a scientist. I'm a really long way from being a scientist. But I've worked with you designing an experiment. In this particular case, we've got a launch date. You mentioned that I might need access to the sample or the experiment last minute notice. So I'll come with you to, say, Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and then we, what happens then? Like, the box gets put on a rocket. Do I put it on a rocket, or like, how does that work?
No, so we handle it, well, basically you transfer it to us, we transfer it to the operator,
Okay.
and then they will just plug it in. So
the operator would be like a SpaceX, for example, or a NASA, or it'd be a private rocket company?
Yeah, it can be a private. Yeah, if you launch with NASA, obviously it's NASA, but basically whoever operates that operation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so you hand it to them, they put it on, and then launch.
Pretty much, yeah.
And okay, pretty much.
Because at that point, the way we design our system, it just need to be bolted in.
Okay.
And that's the last piece of the puzzle.
Okay. So then you launch, and the lab is in space, and you said you get some real-time data back. So me as a client scientist, I'd have some real-time data that's telling me what's happening to my experiment or what's happening with the lab. Is that right?
Correct. So you get like a web-based platform. You can basically get some of the microscopic images, temperature data, fluid data. As the experiment get complicated, you can even intervene. So let's say if you're saying the cell is not behaving quite well, maybe it needs a bit more growth media, you can pump growth media in, for example.
Oh, so I can actually make changes to the
Correct.
to the experiment while it's in space.
Yeah.
And then in your April case, it was there for 3 hours. Then there's re-entry. Am I missing a step at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, we talk about what happened when it's kind of in orbit, right?
Yeah.
It's experience the weightlessness of microgravity. And what we do as well is bring it back down, because there's tools that we just can't put it in space yet. For example, your X-ray crystallography, your chromatography, HPLC tool are quite big, right? And there's value of bringing that back down for post-analysis, basically.
There's re-entry, I guess that's the thing everyone knows. The thing comes down, it's like I've seen on TV, there's a parachute is there, and it kind of gradually kind of floats down. Where does it land? It lands in the ocean, or?
Yeah.
It's
so
like everything I've seen on TV.
Yeah, pretty much. So,
Okay.
I mean, it's two options. It's either land or ocean.
Yeah.
The challenge is because this is still relatively new.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the space re-entry company, they aim for ocean to be a bit safer.
Yeah.
But obviously it's harder to recover. The other option is land. If you want to do that, obviously you need to find somewhere that's vast.
Yeah.
But down the line, and I know this because I'm talking to them, that what they're trying to do is kind of hone down the re-entry zone to a point that is becoming very, very predictable and safe.
So the lab comes back down to Earth. It's now got my samples in that have been grown in space. How do I get it back? So the re-entry company packages it, brings it to you,
and then we ship it back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's the? I mean, I know you did your first launch in April. What's like that end-to-end process from me handing over my sample to getting a sample that's been in space? When do I get it back? Like how long does that take, that window?
So I mean, to give this mission as a perspective, so we actually start making things happen 4 months before, or not 4 months before the launch, but actually the design to delivery of our system to Atmos is 4 months, and then basically we just have to wait until they launch it. In theory, if everything goes smoothly, the launch bit alone can be done in a month. The designing process will take a bit of time, let's say 1 quarter for the first one, and it gets quicker. But yeah, basically the idea is that you will get your results quite quickly in about 6 months. But what we're trying to do is actually start building a process where you can launch it every month. Because as you know, when you're designing an experiment, you can't wait 6 months before you understand what happened to it. So
and that's a really key capability here, isn't it? It's frequency.
Cadence.
Cadence. Because if I'm doing experiments on, say, the International Space Station, I don't have that cadence. I'll do the experiment. I mean, I can get the data back, but I can't get the sample back. Maybe that's 2 years later or whatever, from conception through to getting a sample back. Whereas what you're talking about, the new capability is not only much lower cost, but also much faster cadence, physical results a lot quicker, faster learning, which means faster development benefits. I mean, the benefits here are for everyone, really.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? Because the impact that we're doing here is looking at health, public health.
Yeah. Is space just for billionaires, or are there benefits for the broader population?
Yeah, so one of the reasons we do this is we really want to make a positive impact on human health, right? I think accessing this new environment to find new therapy, to improve therapy, to make drugs more accessible by IV to subcuts. And I think the benefit for the general population is that the way we're developing drugs at the moment is too costly, it's taking too long. And it doesn't match because we are aging population. 1 in 2 people will get cancer, 1 in 3 people will get dementia. That is not a dynamic duo. It's very, very unsymbiotic. And we need to find radical solution. So if we can use space to, let's say, find aging 10 times quicker, that makes aging drugs happen 10 times quicker, hopefully. I don't know how long it will take, but that's the kind of perceived value, right? So if you can shorten 1 year of a 10-year cycle of a 2 billion drug development, that's 2 million cost saving, basically. But the idea is that we need to find new drugs, quicker, and trying to really answer a lot of the health problem on Earth.
You started this with a personal story, which is your great aunt suffering from cancer, and you wanting to do something about that. So you're wanting to build health for the masses, right?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I saw the progression, the memory that I had when I was a kid. She kind of helped raise me, and then like the deterioration in health. If we can, for example, ease that by making injectables, where we don't need to go, she doesn't need to go hospital, and her family member don't need to take a day off and to go hospital. All of that eases the pain. And I think one of the biggest opportunity is, as you kind of mentioned, the larger biologics, the monoclonal antibodies. Those are kind of like the next generation therapeutics, but it's going to be hard because they are big on Earth. So I think there's opportunity here to go into space to use this new physical environment alteration to benefit health.
Aqeel, thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I've learned so much from it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dom.